Amazing. Let's let everybody in. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for being with us. We'll just give everybody a chance to get connected up to their audio, get settled in. A few more of you jumping in. So please do let us know in the chat box where you're joining us from this evening. I think as a panel, we are up and down the country right now. And we've got Ebs over in Spain as well. So we are global. Awesome. Just give us another second. I can see we've just got a couple of you still needing to connect to your audio as well. So then we'll get started on a very important topic and something that I know lots of you will be catching up on the recording for as well. So this is something that we are really passionate about at VetU. We feel like these conversations really need opening ahead of time and empowering people to be able to take action as well. So I can see in the chat box, we've got Super Sussex, Ibiza, Manchester, Southeast London, Kent from work are dedicated, being on the Vet U call while still at work. Amazing. And as Ebony says, yep, any questions that you'd like to ask anonymously, you can direct message them to Ebony, who is our tech team this evening, or you can send them direct to myself, Matt, Ruth, Jenny, and one of us will ensure that we ask those anonymously for you. Awesome. So we've still got some of you joining. So give it one more second and then we will get going. So as ever, we always say this on every single Vet U call, there's no such thing as a stupid question. If you're wondering it, then somebody else probably is as well. So use this as your opportunity and as your chance to ask these things. We're really thrilled that we've got Ruth, experienced financial professional, with us this evening as well. So this is the right place to ask. You definitely will not be the only one that is wondering these things. So we're going to be covering some top asked questions around protecting your income. We're going to be busting some myths. We see the same questions come up time and time again in the forums, and we really want to address some of those. So let us get started and we'll let people come in as we go. So we wanted to share with you, first of all, a study that came out just this year, and this appeared in August, which is really interesting when we look at some of the stats around workplace injuries, especially in the veterinary profession. And this was an occupational medicine journal that I haven't seen talked about much in VetMed yet, but it's got some really interesting stats in there, which really highlight why us talking about protecting our income if we are to be unexpectedly injured or sick is so, so important. So the first thing that they talk about is the fact that the veterinary industry has one of the highest case rates of non-fatal occupation injuries and illnesses per full-time worker. We are a high-risk profession. Often we don't acknowledge that enough. Secondly, and this is in the USA, but we know a lot of this can be extrapolated. In the USA, no other industry has a higher level of work-related injury rates. It's almost 5 times higher than the national average, which I think is mind-blowing in itself. And in the UK, being an equine vet is deemed to be the most dangerous civilian profession. Yeah, let's let that set in from this study. And they've actually gone in there and started realizing that injury rates are probably actually much higher because there are tons of things that we don't report. They said that things like needle stick injuries weren't being reported, and anything that was non-animal related tended not to be reported. So if someone injured themselves, I don't know, tripping down some steps at a yard, or they walked into a table or something and injured themselves, nobody was writing that in the accident book. It was only if they were animal related injuries that they were writing those down. So if this doesn't open our eyes to us being a high-risk profession, I don't know what would do. And this really cements why it's important for us to think about protecting our income, which is what we're going to touch on this evening with Ruth, our fantastic financial professional, in just a minute. But first of all, what is the aim of today? We want to continue, as we have been doing, with the awesome help of the Veterinary Woman team and Jenny, and we'll introduce everyone on our panel very shortly, but we want to keep breaking the stigma around money discussions. We know that when the Veterinary Woman community was surveyed, it was found that money was one of the highest stress points that was coming up, and time again, we see it in forums, whichever space in the profession that we're in. It's something that we're really passionate about talking about, and we know it affects our well-being in many different ways. We want to shine a light on the times when the worst happens, not to terrify anyone, but to say, look, this does happen. And it's not just equine vets that are going to be kicked by horses. It can happen on the way to work. It might be that we develop an illness otherwise without an accident specifically being there. But let's talk about this ahead of time, because often we get people coming to vet you and saying, this has happened, what options do I have? And actually they find out that income protection, for example, would have been an option, but sadly when it's too late. We're going to outline options for protecting your income specifically, and we're going to touch on a couple of the other policies that you might hear spoken about as well. And you get a chance to have your questions answered. Anyone that jumped on a little bit later, just to remind you, there is no such thing as a stupid question. Please do pop them in the chat box, ask away. We get so many of the same ones come through time and time again around this topic. So we want to make sure we address those for you as well. So we have an awesome panel this evening, and I'm going to get everyone to briefly introduce themselves so you'll be able to get to know us a little bit more. But my name is Katie. I'm one of the VetU team at VetU. We love educating, but also connecting you as veterinary professionals with financial professionals like the awesome Ruth that I will hand to in a second. And we really truly believe in helping you protect your income, your future, and also your health too. So we've got a whole series that we're very fortunate and very proud to be doing in collaboration with the awesome Veterinary Woman team as well. So I'll hand to Matt.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Yeah, my name's Matt Dobbs. I'm a farm vet by background and have spent a bit of time in clinical practice, but also in management, and was one of the original founders of VetU simply because I was lucky enough, having qualified last millennia, to have received some very good financial advice in my early years and realized that some of that advice was not necessarily around these days. And so wanted the opportunity to be able to share some of that love to newer graduates and also those that weren't fortunate enough to get some of that advice in their early years.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Matt. And then Ruth.
Hello, everybody. So I've been in the industry for quite some time now. I think I've seen over, I think is it about 550 veterinarians, thanks to the wonderful VetU. So done initial chats and helped guide people onto the right track. And that's because I'm deeply passionate about what I do, about doing the right thing, making sure people have the right advice to make informed decisions for themselves and their future. So yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to be here and help you guys today.
Thank you so much, Ruth. And we're looking forward to lots more wisdom this evening. So if you do have any questions, make sure you got those in the chat. And then finally, the awesome Jenny from Veterinary Woman. Thank you so much for collaborating with us on this, Jenny.
No, that's not a problem. It's something which the Veterinary Woman readers said in the last readership survey they really needed to know more about was personal finance. And we are all aware of what an effect it can have on well-being and how important it is that we can get good financial advice and stop feeling scared about the subject, which is why we thought that VetU were the perfect people to collaborate with.
Oh, thank you so much. And we've loved doing that. This is the second in our series. In the first one, we were talking all about budgeting, weren't we? And breaking down some of those barriers and myths that often come up around finances. So if anyone does want to catch up on that one, we'll make sure that is adequately signposted along the way. And we've got the awesome Ebony, who is also part of VetU alongside Matt and I, and she is in the chat box doing tech support this evening. So we're all vets, not financial professionals. That's why we bring on board financial professionals like Ruth to help answer those questions. So I just wanted to recap this if anybody missed these stats, which are quite eye-opening, again, about how high of a risk our profession is. I know a couple of you have just joined us, but this just shows it's not just a nice to have for us to look at how can we protect our income. Which brings us on nicely to, if we can't work, where does the money come from? And often this is a question that we don't ask ourselves until the time comes where the worst happens and people realize, oh my gosh, my workplace only covers me for 2 weeks. Or maybe it's that all that we've got access to is statutory sick pay, which, Ruth, do you know at the moment how much SSP is right now?
I know it's very low and not enough to keep you sustained at the minute. I'll have a look at the latest figures, but yeah, I know it's exceptionally low.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it's around sort of 90 to £100 a week, which
Yeah.
isn't going to sustain us if you've got mortgages, if you've got bills, families, whatever that looks like. So this is a question that's always key for us to ask ourselves, like, where does that money come from? And this could happen to any of us. So I know I did never intend to become a walking example for Vet U, but this was me last summer. I do not do that much clinical work now as I'm running businesses, and I am up and down the country doing all sorts, but I'm not even in contact with many animals these days other than my own. And suddenly in May last year, I couldn't move my right leg, could barely move my left leg, and I found myself in this hospital bed for about 3 weeks. Now, that was a very leveling and stressful time where I had no idea what was going to happen. I was worried about all sorts of things in terms of my career and my family and my aspirations and what was going to happen, let alone starting to think, gosh, I'm not making any money whatsoever. How am I going to cover the bills? How am I going to cover my mortgage? How am I going to cover like the bare necessities that need doing here? And thankfully, I did have income protection insurance, which Ruth is going to tell us all about in the next slide as well. And that meant that, yes, it was still stressful because I couldn't walk. Thankfully, I can now. But it meant that I had a percentage of my income that was covered so that I knew that my bills were paid and I could put my energy towards recovery rather than having to scramble together a plan to make sure that I didn't have my home repossessed or that I didn't have to suddenly start thinking, who am I going to try and borrow some money from as well? So this is just to highlight this can happen to any of us. And it's not always injuries at work. So we're going to have a couple of the community actually share their stories as well as we go. We've got, thankfully, some very kind people that have shared, and we'll bring those to life in just a second as well. So I can see we've got in the chat as well, Ruth, thank you, £116.75 a week for statutory sick pay, which, let's consider that. Is that enough to cover everything? Most times it isn't. So Ruth, would you like to tell us all about income protection and what it actually is?
Yeah, so as you can see on here, income protection is something that protects your income. So I know there's lots of terms that are thrown out there. I'm going to throw in life insurance, which will come on. I'm going to throw in critical illness cover. But income protection is one of the first things that when I've looked at with clients is to see if they do have cover. It protects your income if you are sick or injured and unable to work up to a certain percentage. Now, okay, I'm going to have to tell you guys, it will not protect 100% of your income if you are sick or injured, because let's face it, who would go back to work if it did offer 100%? So it's usually up to the amount of about 75% of your salary. And there's lots of different things that you can have with it, lots of different terms that you'll probably hear thrown around. So one of them is, as you can see here, benefits that can rise each year by inflation or by a fixed percentage. Now, for anything extra with income protection, for instance, you might have, say, 75% of your salary covered, but then you decide to have it rise with inflation, which is the amount of what the cost of goods and services rise each year, then that will be an additional add-on as well. And then we've got things like own occupation or any occupation. I've got to say, with income protection, that's the most common question, Katie, that I get asked. It's always, what kind of insurance do I need, Ruth? There's so many different types, and how do I know which one is going to be right for me? So own occupation is if you are sick and injured and unable to do your own occupation. So whatever field you're in, it will cover your job specifically. Now, if it's any occupation, it tends to be cheaper cover because it means that if you can do any occupation, then you might have to go back to work to, I always use this as make the tea in the office, put the kettle on or do administrative services, things like that. So it's a lot cheaper to get, but it doesn't give you the maximum coverage that you can, but it is cheaper. Were you going to add something, Katie?
I was just going to say, I know we've seen examples as well, haven't we, of like own occupation for someone covered as, say, a farm vet. If they've not had that own occupation, then someone could argue and say, well, you could still be a small animal vet, for example, technically, and the insurance company doesn't understand that it might have been 20 years since you've thought about dogs or cats in a veterinary sense. I know Matt's nodding along right now, but technically, physically, if you didn't have own occupation, they might say, well, you could still actually work in a role, or you could still go and lecture at university or something like that.
I feel you, Matt, with that one. I do. I feel you, because the last thing you want to do is be told when you are genuinely sick and you're injured that you've got to go back and make the tea or do something that isn't your job role. And it's not just from the fact of going back to work, but it's your job satisfaction. It's obviously not what you've been trained to do. And I think it's really important, and I'm on a mission to make sure that everyone who takes out protection gets the right cover for you, and especially make sure that you know the full ins and outs of what that coverage is and what it means. And I promise you, it's not complicated. It's just there's so many different choices, and we look at what's the right thing for you based on what you do, and also affordability and other things. And please don't ever feel embarrassed about reaching out and asking someone for a bit of help. Like, I do initial consultations completely free with people. And Katie, you mentioned something the other day, I can't remember what it was, when you were talking about a certain veterinary, I can't even say what it was, by scenario, and I had no clue what it was. Please try and repeat it, because I can't.
We were saying, in terms of, obviously, with us and our personal finances, we're all individuals and we all need different things based on our individual circumstances. A little bit like if we had a webinar and we were going to do it about kidney disease in cats, for example, and we might have a client that's coming to this webinar about kidney disease in cats, and they say, what does my cat need? And we say, well, that depends on what's their UPC, what's their USG, have they lost weight, are they eating, and what's the creatinine level? I was saying all of this during a live session we were doing for some graduates, and Ruth's like, I have no idea what you just said there, any of this. And
I can't even repeat. USG was that one? Yeah, it's something like that. So I could not come into your job and do the amazing, wonderful things that you do every day. But to the same extent, I wouldn't expect you to come into my job and do what I do and offer, come out with all the different terms and explain what they mean. So please never, ever feel embarrassed about, not knowing or where to start. And I think the other thing to mention just on this slide is, it pays a tax-free income. So that's so important, because it means that if you're getting 75% of your salary, you're not getting taxed on top of that as well, where you end up with maybe 60% of it or whatever that may be. And when it says the pre-selected deferred period, now, what does deferred period mean? It means that when that policy will actually pay out. So if I've taken out cover, but actually I have nothing spare to keep myself going, I've got no emergency fund or anything like that, I might need my cover to start on day one. Now, if I get my cover to start on day one that I'm sick, then obviously it's going to be the most expensive, because it's covering me from day one. But you might select a deferred period of, say, 2 weeks or 1 month, and then it starts to become cheaper. So I always talk about having an emergency fund spare if you can. I know it's given lots of other names, but having something set aside that is usually about 3 times your total expenditure for all your bills in the month. And that could be 3 months of a deferred period that you could have before that policy kicks in. And why is it cheaper, I hear you ask? I know that's a burning question in everyone's minds, but that's because the actual policy providers think that you'll probably recover within that time. So they make it a lot cheaper, because then they think they might not necessarily need to pay out by the time you're going to have recovered. So it's also, there's lots of handy hints and tips to make it cheaper if needs be, if you've got the foundations in place. And like we've said, to me, I say make sure that you review it regularly, because a free protection health check, well, it's free. Just check that it's right for you. And I've told lots of people that actually the cover that they've had is absolutely perfect for them. They don't need to do anything. It works. It's the cheapest that's out there. But policy providers always update, every single, you like everything, your phone updates, doesn't it, constantly to the latest software. It's the same with different providers. There's always something else that they're adding on, like mental health coverage as well under certain plans. There's lots of different offerings that are out there, which is why I always say make sure you review it regularly.
A little bit like in terms of when we're dealing with our clients and pet insurance, for example. There are so many different levels of cover, aren't there? And knowing that people can have that free protection health check that I know you've offered for so long now for members of the community, Ruth, means that we're not going to have that unexpected surprise, which I'm sure we've all been there with a client who thinks they've got an all singing, all dancing insurance policy, and then suddenly the worst happens and we have to tell them that they've got a limit of £500 or £1,000 or something like that. And actually it's not going to cover them for what they were expecting it to do. So we'll talk more about what that is as a protection, get the words out, protection health check further on, and lots of key common questions as well that come up. So if anyone else has any, pop them in the chat, but there are lots of them that we are going to touch on very shortly. And now we wanted again just to really bring this to life from a member of the community. So Naomi Meller is an awesome friend of VetU. She actually hosted a podcast series where we had lots of financial professionals way back when from VetU talking, and she's going to share here about what a difference income protection made to her. So Matt or Jenny, I will just get you to pop your thumb up to make sure that the sound plays properly on this.
Hello everybody, really hope you're enjoying this excellent VetU webinar. Sorry I can't be there in person with you to learn along, but I'm sure there's tons of great stuff going on. I'm Naomi Meller, I'm an equine vet. I qualified back in 2007 and I'm just dropping in today to have a very quick tip about income protection. When I was a new graduate way back when, I took out an income protection policy for my first job after we had had a talk from one of the companies associated with the British Veterinary Association at the time. And I had income protection in my first role in mixed practice. But I then moved overseas and worked in Australia for a few years where that policy didn't cover me, so I cancelled it. And when I came home, I never retook it out again. And I was without income protection for a long time, maybe like 12 or 14 years or something. And I was very lucky and I didn't have any problems. And that went on until the back end of 2022 when I became self-employed. And I decided at that point that it would probably be prudent to take out an income protection policy because I have a mortgage. And that what did indeed prove to be a good decision, because last year, so 18 months ago now, I was injured quite badly in a nasty car accident at work while I was driving on my way to a visit, and that ended up with me having a reasonably prolonged stay in Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, and I haven't yet returned to practice. So I have been very grateful for the help that my income protection has given me over the last 18 months. I've had a really excellent claims manager and some people who've been supporting me at the back end. And if anyone would like to chat about that, then I'm really open to speaking to anyone who wishes to get in touch with me. Ebony has all my details, but I know that there's loads of great financial advice through VetU and lots of help out there if you need it. So do have a little think about income protection. It's not cheap if you're in large animal or equine practice, but for me, it has most definitely been worth it. So definitely give it a thought.
Amazing. And I know Naomi won't see this right now, but a huge thank you to her for sharing her story. And Naomi is just one of many. And I know, Matt, you know lots of people in the profession that have ended up unexpectedly sick, injured, or having to use the protection policies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, it's not just the obvious injuries either that you might get from a kick or a bite. There's all sorts of things from, dislocated slip discs right the way through to gallstones, which have meant that people have had to take time off work at short notice. So definitely one to seriously consider getting yourself protected from in the future, because who knows what might happen when.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did just want to touch on a new offering that you collaborated on as well, which I know Matt will cover for us just now too. Really excited about this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, the first thing I want to say is if you're interested in protecting your income, should you be unable to work, then definitely an appointment with Ruth and finding out an understanding more about the policy that will best suit you and your circumstances, particularly around own occupation, but also maybe the level of cover that you want, is the best option. However, I do know that vets are busy people, and if you are in a position where you're struggling to find that time, or more importantly, you know exactly what you want to cover, then maybe Home Protector is for you. Home Protector is a type of protection that provides you with a payment if you are towards your mortgage or rental cost if you're unable to work in a similar way that income protection does. It can only cover your mortgage or your rent, plus maybe often a little bit extra, and it's a non-guided, non-advised policy. So by that I mean you really need to be comfortable that you know and understand what you need to cover and that you've got the rest of your protection in your life well under control. But if that does fit your bill, and even if you're just intrigued as to how much a policy to cover off your rent or your mortgage in the occasion that you can't work and how much it might cost you, there's an absolutely free, no obligation quote that you can get via the VetU website. It's instant. It works. Well, I say it's instant. It takes a little bit time sometimes to load up because the algorithms, the API is linked directly to the insurance underwriter to make sure that they get the right policy for you based on your age and the amount of cover that you want. One of the advantages that it's instantly available. So if, for example, you want to take out a policy that covers your mortgage and rent if you were unable to work immediately, then it is the sort of policy that you can get on cover, as it were, straight away, simply by accepting the quote once you go through the VetU website. So as I said, it's absolutely not for everybody. And my overall advice is please make time for yourself to book an appointment with Ruth or an IFA and better understand what the right type of policy is for you. But if you haven't got that time, or if you want that quick option, or even just to try and understand how much protection might cost you on a monthly basis, Home Protector is going to give you a great idea. The really exciting thing about this policy is it's only available to two professions. Only two professions were seen as, dare I say, honest enough and consistent enough when they're applying for this policy to be accepted by the underwriter as providing genuine information. Those two professions were professional golfers and veterinary surgeons. So that's one thing that we have in common with a professional golfer. We're both seen by the insurance industry as being an honest profession when it comes out to taking out insurance and unlikely to try and game the system. So anyway, if you get a chance, have a look at the Home Protector page on the VetU website. At the very least, it will give you an idea of what this sort of protection might cost you on a monthly basis.
And there is a really fantastic 5-minute video on the VetU website about this that explains how it all works, what information that they need ahead of time. You also get 24/7 GP appointment, online GP appointments. There's all sorts that goes with it. So Ebony can perhaps pop the link in the chat for people to have a look at. But like Matt said, making time to chat to Ruth, just in the same way that we'd want our clients to come to a professional, makes total sense. So if anyone is sat there wondering all sorts of questions about income protection and policies, we are going to come back to the FAQs in just a second. But Ruth, as a financial advisor, you must see people end up needing to use these policies from all walks of life, all the time, all circumstances.
Absolutely. So this is just thing that keeps coming up whenever I've had chats with people in the past about protection. They've always said, oh, I'm young, it will never happen to me. And I'm just like, I really hope so. And there's a phrase that I always say, and it's not necessarily the nicest, but it's the best way to do it. It's plan for the worst, but hope for the best, because you can't do much after the horse has bolted. So if there's something that you've kind of, you know, a condition that you might have necessarily, it'll make it slightly, it's not impossible, to make it slightly hard to get that cover again, unless you've not suffered with it for you know, a number of years. But this was one of my friends called M. You know, she was absolutely fine. I asked her if she could use this photo, but you know, she was young. She was about 22 when this photo was taken. She went away with a friend to Spain, and they got on a moped that they hired, set off riding, and the accelerator got stuck, and they basically went off I say a cliff, and this was the result. She had to have this leg brace on, numerous operations over the years to try and get that right. And it's just something that you really have to think, oh, it just won't happen to me, because it could happen to anyone, any age, at any time. And I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but it's like, I always worry, like, oh, what if I didn't have that cover? And I always think back to this, because she was actually a gym manager at the time of a fitness gym. So fitness was just her world, and it was just completely taken away because of a malfunction of a moped. And the most, you know, fantastic time, you're away on holiday, you know, getting a bit of sun. And yeah, it's something that she wanted to raise awareness of, to say it can happen to anybody.
Yeah. And especially bearing in mind those statistics around our profession as well that we shared right at the start. So a couple of things that people talk about, Ruth, as well, just when we are talking about things like protecting our income, we have conversations around things like critical illness cover. And we wanted to really briefly touch on this, because it can feel like there's lots of different terms coming up and which ones do we need. So if you're happy to cover critical illness cover, that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'd say is, when I look at order of priority, depending on someone's specific circumstances, but I would always first of all go to income protection, and I'd be looking, have you got income protection? Who's it with, and is it the right cover for you, first of all? And then I kind of have a look at kind of life insurance and critical illness cover. It's not necessarily appropriate for everyone to get, in all honesty, but critical illness cover, as it says, is something that will pay out if you have a critical illness. This is something like coronary heart disease, you know, if you have a heart attack, you know, cancer, all those kind of critical illness covers. So it could pay a lump sum of, let's say, £70,000. And if you think about it, the more that you take out, so you could say £100,000, then it's going to be more expensive for you to take. Less expensive, 20,000, it's going to be a lot less expensive because you're not having as much. But it's designed to cover things like, if you're not going to live for a long time after you've been diagnosed with this critical illness, to make life a little bit more comfortable. So that could be adaptations to your house. You know, unfortunately, if you might have to be in a wheelchair to make access a lot easier to your house. It could also be to go on, like, you know, the holiday of your dreams. It can be for anything, and that's what the lump sum is. And as it can see there's lots of different kind of things that you can be covered for, you know, all around, you know, supplementary insurance that it can be with life insurance. And that's what a lot of people don't think about, because if you get life insurance, critical illness cover can be a bolt on. So when I say bolt on, it means that literally you pay for your life insurance, but you can have, like, pay maybe an extra £1 or £2 a month, and it's bolted on, and it will be paid out on the first diagnosis. So obviously, you know, if you're critically ill, then it will pay out that amount on the first diagnosis. But there's lots of different ways that you can have it. But I'm going to summarize: if you have a critical illness, it will pay a lump sum.
And each insurer tends to have a list of what classes as a critical illness, don't they?
Absolutely. And there's, you know, if there's something in, you know, in your family potentially that you suffer from, then you could make sure that that insurer maybe, you know, that's one of the things that it will pay out for.
And I know personally, I've had family members that have used their critical illness cover and they've, for example, paid off the mortgage. So that
Yes.
then they just know that that is paid off and they don't have to stress about what happens further down the line. So you touched on life insurance, which again, without us being too morbid and thinking about what happens to our loved ones if we die, do you want to touch on this as well, Ruth?
Yeah, so I think it's about to use like circumstances. So, you know, I live with my partner and, you know, I've got life insurance because I would like, if anything was to happen to me, that the mortgage and any bills or debts were completely paid off so that he doesn't have to worry about it. Because the last thing you want when you're grieving someone that you kind of, you know, love and care about is having to think, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to pay the mortgage? Which is obviously one of the bigger payments that all of us will have. When it comes to our property. So life insurance is like a lump sum payment that will pay out for any large debts that you might have, that will help make life easier for the person that you're leaving, you know, behind. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I've specifically got it. I mean, to be honest, I go on some calls with people and they're like, Ruth, I've got nobody to, you know, to leave any money to. I mean, with my house, they'd just sell it and it'd be distributed as per either the will, or in line with, you know, to the mum and the dad, etc. So they're like, I don't really, you know, I need it. And that can be your prerogative, but it's usually a large lump sum that can be paid out in line with usually a big debt like a mortgage. Yeah, it just helps make life easier for who you're leaving behind.
And when we've touched on this a little bit already, Ruth, the idea of doing a protection health check, which is looking at the protection policies that you've already got, or maybe what your potential risks might be, and then coming back to then giving some either insights based on what you've got. Is it fit for purpose? What might be recommended? And that includes not just income protection, but it includes things like critical illness and life insurance and other protections, doesn't it?
Mm. There's all kinds of different covers that you can. These are I'd probably say the three main ones: income protection, life insurance, and critical illness cover. And I can see Ebbs has said, obviously, you know, especially if there's young children involved, there's lots of different policies. One that a lot of the families, and I'll mention it in case there's anyone with children on the call, but it's called family income benefit. And what that does is, if unfortunately one of the, you know, the parents has passed away, family income benefit, it can pay that salary of the person that has passed away up until the children are, it can be up to the age of 18, 21, 23. And it's actually, we call it, I'm going to mention a term here, decreasing term assurance policy. But what that means is it can be quite cheap because it decreases as the children get older because there's not as much income that needs to be paid out. So it's very affordable, and something that I don't think there's one person that I've chatted to that's had children that has been aware of it. So when it comes to these health checks, it's all about giving you the tools to know, based on your circumstances, what might be right for you. There's absolutely zero pressure to take anything out or do anything. It's just to give information for you to take away and know, actually, that might be relevant or that isn't relevant. But yeah, there's all kinds of really good policies specific out there that can help.
And if anyone does want a protection health check, if they email us hello@vetu.co.uk, just put the subject as protection health check and say, like, introducing to Ruth for that, we'll be able to make that happen. And one of the reasons why VetU was started was to try and find accessible, trustworthy financial advice, which we've loved working with Ruth over the last few years and realizing that actually so many of the testimonials that we get off the back of the protection health check say, you know what, she said that everything was fine. It was great because I didn't feel like I was sold to. I felt like actually she had my genuine interest at heart, which we can tell you after all these years working together, she absolutely does. And that's why she's here giving you her time this evening, because there's nothing more heartbreaking than people coming to us or seeing it in the group saying, I'm suddenly injured or I'm ill and I don't have any cash coming in. Like, I don't know what to do. So let us dive into some of the common questions that we get around income protection, Ruth. And I think we've touched on a few of these. These might be a bit quick fire, but if we had the key things for somebody to look for with an income protection policy as a veterinary professional, what are some key tips and insights alongside having a free chat with you?
I mean, it's really interesting because some of the key things, as it says, is make sure you find a provider that specializes in your profession. So I know a couple that do specifically, and you know, when you go through it, it's like, this is my job, and they go, oh right, yeah, it's there, instead of you have to find something else that is like your job but not quite. So look at, I guess, start at home first of all and look at how much you need covering. So I'll use an example, and I'm going to use extremes, but say you earn £100,000 in a year. And this is quite important. I'm not going to say protect up to 75% of that salary, okay? Because it all depends what your bills are. Because your bills might only be, say, I'll say £1,000 a month, okay? Why would you insure up to that amount where it could be very expensive when actually all you need is to cover just your bills and your take home, you know, how much you need to pay to make sure that you can keep the electric on at night. So I would look at how much your bills are every single month. And then we know exactly what obviously the minimum is that you need to cover to make sure that you're protected. You might not need to cover the £100,000 salary. It'd be great if we're all on that, wouldn't it? But it's just a little bit of a key consideration. And then what kind of, if you've already got an existing policy and you like to look through the detail, I love it. That's why I know I'm in the right job, because looking at the nitty gritty detail, I really, really do love, because you find out so much stuff. Anyway, I know that's not everyone's favorite, but it's why I know I absolutely love what I do. But look, is it own occupation it's based on? Is it any occupation? You might have just gone on one of these websites and clicked through, and then it's given you, you go, oh, I'm protected, I'm fine. But actually, what is it protecting? Is it protecting you? Is it protecting your profession? Is it protecting you to make the tea, you know, in your practice? Or is it actually protecting you to actually do your own occupation? So there's lots of key things to think about. But is it protected up to the retirement age? So that could be 67. Or is it only paying out for maybe 2 years? Because I didn't mention this earlier, but some policies, if affordability is an issue, please don't worry and think, oh, I can't afford it. You can have some short-term policies that will pay out for maybe 2 years. I wouldn't necessarily, if you can afford more, I'd probably, you know, say try and get one that will pay out to retirement age. It might be slightly more expensive, but it means that, say, if, you know, like Katie, when you said when you're unfortunately in hospital, you know, and it paid out, you've gone back to work, it will continue. If something else happens down the line, it will pay out again, and it will pay out again up to the retirement age of 67 for you. Whereas some of these shorter term policies, it will only pay out for a specified period, and probably I'd say up to about 2 years. And then obviously when you come to get cover again, you will need to disclose it. So that's why I think it's really important to just find out exactly what you have. And if you don't like to do that, then field it out to someone that loves it.
I know just the person. And it's interesting having heard Naomi's story as well, because she said her accident was 18 months ago and she's still not back into practice yet. Often we think that it can be something that, oh, I'll be over most things in 3, 4, 5 months. And one of the things that I know has come up when we've had discussions with people as well, thinking about us as veterinary professionals, I know it's not everyone, but sometimes people that are horse riders, for example, need to ensure that they've got a policy that's specific and not having exclusions maybe for sports that they partake in as well. All sorts of things that having somebody on board to help you assess this fully is valuable, right?
Absolutely. I actually had someone not that long ago, funny enough you say that, is she actually came to me and said, Ruth, I've got this policy, could you kind of have a look into it? And I looked at her and I was like, it's slightly more than what I thought it would be based on things that you've discussed. And then when it came down to it, she was like, yeah, I do horse riding, you know, I do like cross country, you know, professionally. And I kind of go out and do it. And I was like, right, that makes sense. Because if you are going to kind of, you know, do a sport that might be slightly more hazardous, could be skydiving, could be like me, I love like riding a motorbike, you know, it's like something that I love, but is slightly has higher risks. Make sure that it's covered just in case. And yes, you might pay slightly more, but at least you have the security of knowing it's been disclosed, which means you've told somebody at the protection about it, and it will pay out.
Such good insights. And I can see that we've had a message in the chat, which I think will come on to this as well, regarding how does your insurance policy differ with regard to pre-existing conditions, and having a share in the chat as well about finding it very expensive, near on impossible to get life insurance until you've been so many years free of medical diagnosis.
Yeah.
But then seeing TV adverts for products saying buy this insurance without medical checks, for example. So as if by magic, that is our next question anyway. Is it true I won't be able to get a policy if I have pre-existing conditions? I know we've done a full 3-part series on this alongside British Veterinary Chronic Illness Support as well. So we do dive deeper, but give us a lowdown, Ruth, on pre-existing conditions and protection policies.
Yeah, so I would say probably get someone to do the legwork for you. A little bit of a sneaky little in here is that if you had to go and call every single provider that was out there, then it would take a lot of your time to do that, to find out if it's covered. With free protection health checks, get someone to look at all of your options for you with all the different providers and speak to these providers on your behalf to say, is it covered? You know, I think we did some work with Spoonies, didn't we, Katie, a while ago, and we went through a lot of the pre-existing conditions, and got a couple of the members cover when they thought it was impossible to do. There will be a slightly more, you know, there's more things that we have to go through in the process, but at least you know it's going to get covered. So it is not impossible to get cover. It might be slightly more expensive, I'm not going to lie, because if they will include that existing condition, if they will, they put what's called loading onto the amount that you pay per month, which means it goes up in line with obviously the severity of what you might be suffering. Or it might be that you can get cover, but you'll have to exclude that kind of pre. But I think it's always worth a conversation, because even if you speak to someone, they might say, look, we can look at getting you cover, but you have to be free of that pre-existing condition for like 2 years. And then at least you know, actually, if you've been free of it for 2 years, you can go to that provider and it could, you know, cover it for you. But the one thing I'll say with any pre-existing condition, please, please, please don't ever hide it. Please be really honest with the protection provider or whoever you speak to, because they will be very quick to take your money to pay every single month. But unless you have it looked into properly, it might not pay out when you come to claim. And that's something that I want all these policies to pay out for you when you come to take cover. So it's really important to make sure you fully disclose it.
Definitely. And one thing that always stuck with me, Ruth, when we did that session with Spoonies was the screenshot I know you took of an email where you were actually going back and forth with the underwriters way back then, saying, look, actually, they were people that you were able to speak to as a financial professional on behalf of your client, versus when we ring up and we can't get to that point of being able to have those negotiations. And it was so clear when you shared that of just how much in their corner you were, of saying, look, can we come back to you on this? Will you reconsider this? Will you look at this again? And that seems priceless, being able to have someone that can do that for you.
I can't remember what it was they said, but it was so nice to have someone fighting your corner. I'll have to try and find that little testimonial out, but it really is. It's like, oh, I don't like term no. I like to just test every single area that you can. And also, it's about if there's a term that's used I'm like, you're not going to confuse me. I know exactly what you're talking about, and you're talking a load of rubbish. So let's go back to this and see if we can still get you cover. So it's having someone that will fight your corner, that knows all about it, as much as I would want you to fight my corner if anything happened with Nessie. So my cat. So that's the way I look at it. I really do, fight for you.
Love that. And I guess the other thing as well, in the very unlikely scenario that there is nothing available, if you've got a financial professional with you that can help you understand incomings, outgoings, options, backup plans, what else might be available to you, then you've got somebody that's going to be able to help you understand that, because it feels really overwhelming, right? Otherwise, to think, right, there's no options. Because like you've said, Ruth, you always find a way. You always help people be able to find what their options look like. And Ebony has very kindly put the catch up to those sessions in the chat box as well, if anybody wants to watch those. So I know you touched on this very briefly, so maybe a quick summary of it. The deferral period for income protection, and how long should I choose?
Yeah, so I think it all depends on what funds you probably have spare. Like I've said, they 3 times your total expenditure in a month. So if your bills are £1,000 per month, complete for what you choose to spend your money on, so the fun stuff, like, if you're like me, Vinted, and if you're like you like going to, it might be going to the cinema or meals out, and then the essential expenditure, so things, the not so fun stuff, your gas, your electric, your council tax, all that, your phone bills, all of that stuff. If it's a total of £1,000 per month, then you need roughly about £3,000 in an emergency fund, because that will cover 3 months of your bills should you be sick or injured, or if something else happens. And then in that case, I'd probably say, look to have a 3 month deferral period, because it'll make it cheaper. Some people want to know, well, I don't want to use the deferral period, I just want it to start from day one, and that's absolutely fine, but it'll just make it slightly more expensive. I'd say the usual that I've come across in, history with people I've worked with is usually about a month they tend to have, because it's enough to kind of make it slightly cheaper, but also pay out so you're not dipping into your savings. But if you do have 3 months, then, use that and make it even more cheaper.
And I know, just a personal share, mine was 4 weeks as well. And it was 4 weeks
Oh,
from when
okay.
my illness started. So actually it meant that it didn't feel like, oh my gosh, should I be telling them? Should I not tell them? Like, at what point do I tell them that I'm unwell and that I need to claim? And when does that 4 weeks come? And actually, we've always found that whoever it is that's there to be able to help, and Ruth, obviously, if you help people take policies out, you're really good at being able to help them figure out the best way to navigate that policy as well, is just really invaluable. So our next question is, how much would I get and how much does it pay for? Which I feel like this should be a quiz now, based on the fact that we've covered some of these already, but to be really clear.
Yeah, so how much would you get? Well, it can pay up to 75% of your salary. And yes, so that's as much as you want to. So you don't, like I've said, have to do up to, say, 100,000 if that's what you earn. You could just do it so it covers your bills, and make sure that they're paid. And how long does a policy pay out for? Well, the usual term that I'd probably recommend if it's affordable is up to retirement age. So, that can be up to the age of, I think, 67. You can get it up to. I actually did, it wasn't that long ago, somebody came to me with a really old, like, they didn't even have it online, it was all paper copies. And I think they were paying something like £2 a month for this policy, and it would have paid out such a large amount, but they took it out when they were young. Because I think the other thing to mention is that if you take something out when you're young, the policy providers think that, well, you're healthy, you're fit, you're unlikely to get unwell, or have something happen where you can't work. So they bring we call it the premiums, the amount that you pay per month, all the way down, to a really affordable level. And you can lock that in early so that it doesn't go up. and you can fix it, which is a phenomenal offering. And that's what this person had it from day one. And I think they were about 60 going, when will this still pay out? And it would have. And they were paying, like I said, something ridiculous, less than £5 a month for it. So yeah, like we just said, it can pay out if as soon as you're injured, you let the insurance provider know, and then it will give you whatever the deferral period is. It'll pay out after that, and then once you're better and can go back to work, it continues again. And if you're unable to work up until retirement age, it will continue all the way up until retirement age. And what a weight off your mind that can be if it's something a bit more serious.
Ah, one of the things that really surprised me when I claimed, and obviously I know each policy is going to be different, but was the opportunity almost for like a staged return as well. Because obviously I run my own businesses, and I thought, when does that point come that I feel like I could do a bit of work, but I don't feel like I could do like the full how many days per week yet? And realizing that there was that opportunity of like slightly less of a payout, but I could do a day a week and so on. So it was interesting going through that experience from this side myself too. So thank you, Ruth. Our next one.
No, that just to say that's a really good point, Katie, is that there are things where they have I can't remember the exact term, but it's like a phased entry back to work where
Yeah.
they help you with that. Well, maybe if you're able to go back initially for 1 day a week, then they will pay you for the other 4 that you're off, if
Yeah.
that's what your terms are. And then maybe after a month you go back for 2 days a week. They pay for that phased return. It's not just a switch on and switch off. Depends on your policy, and it's just something to think about.
Yeah. Well, it made a real difference to me and was definitely an eye-opener, because I thought that I knew a good amount about these policies until that. And it was just a relief to be able to do that stage return too. So our next one is, again, what should I expect to pay for a policy?
Ooh, that's a bell to that. Look, it's usually if you're younger, it's cheaper. If you're older, it's more expensive, because obviously they might think that you're more likely to get sick or injured if you're older. So it all depends what your medical history is. It all depends on, yeah, maybe family history, how old you are. It can also be where you are geographically located. That was another, I was reading an article yesterday about it, saying how people within certain areas, they will pay more for insurance than others, because that has been an area that has historically, they've found that people have claimed a lot more. So it can be for the price of a cup of coffee a week. It can be as cheap as that. But if there's lots of medical history or loading that's added onto a policy because of a pre-existing condition, it can make it more expensive. And once again, if you want the Rolls Royce of coverage, saying I want it to pay on day one and I want it to do up until retirement age and I want then obviously it's going to be more expensive.
And somebody's just asked in the chat as well, what is considered to be older?
Oh gosh. So I'd probably say, I don't know, because it depends on pre-existing conditions. So I got insurance and I'm just slightly over 40, but I got insurance out recently for income protection because obviously I went self-employed, and that was roughly, I think it was to cover about, yeah, I think it was £65 a month for me. So it depends. There's people that there wasn't any pre-existing that was there. So if you're younger, like in your 20s or in your 30s, it does make it cheaper. And it might be because of, the area that I live in, that it was more expensive. It can all depend on, like I've said, where you are. But I'd say over 50, you're starting to struggle to get cover. It's not impossible, but it might become more expensive.
Thank you, Ruth. And just while you're talking, I was thinking when we were looking at like when to start and deferral periods and how much you got in your emergency fund as well, it's well worth everybody checking what their employer will cover them for as well, isn't it? How long their employer might pay out for. sickness too, because we're getting more and more people that will pay for 2, 3, 4 weeks as well. So amazing. You've got some
Katie,
thanks.
you're on fire tonight. Literally, that's another great one that I actually missed because, yeah, don't forget, you've also got, if you are, employed and you are lucky enough that your employer pays out, I've heard of some places that have 6 months full pay and 6 months half pay for if you are sick or injured under their policy. Under that, under the practice. And then there's others that I know will pay out just a week. So it's really important because actually you can put your deferral period to start after that, that amount. If your employer pays up to a month, then you can just cover for the additional 2 months that you might need to make it a 3 month deferral period. And yeah, it makes it so much cheaper.
So everyone go and have a look at your contracts.
Yeah,
Look
it's a
ahead of
great point.
time. Go and have a look. And I think this brings us on as to, I'm just aware of time for everyone and starting to wrap up now. How do I know which policy is right for me and that it will pay out? Big question.
Yeah, so I answered, I think I answered this earlier in that I'd just be wary if people kind of, go on some of these comparison websites and just click, click, click. Oh, I've got cover, I'm fine. Because like I've said, some, might be okay and pay out, but I've had a lot of people come to me that have been upset because something's happened and then it hasn't paid out because a pre-existing condition hasn't been, disclosed. And it might have been in the small print somewhere. So you really do need to make sure that you find the right one that for you that will cover your industry, your hobbies. And then, I always say be as honest and open as possible. Do not give them any excuse not to pay out because you go, I've said this, I've disclosed this. And that's the best way to kind of to do it.
Amazing. And again, if they're coming and talking to you as well, you'll always ensure that what is taken out is correct at that point.
Yeah, because you have someone else also that's been working on it with you. So it's like someone to go to. And like I've said, if someone takes insurance out themselves, that's fine, but you can't come to an advisor looking for help with it. Whereas if you set it up with an advisor, they're always there for any questions or to help you cover claims, if there's anything that happens and talk you through the process.
Amazing, which brings us on nicely when you touched on the idea of financial advisors, that you don't have to do this alone, just in the same way that we don't want our clients to sit and worry about big decisions and try and figure it out by looking those things up online. And there's so much conflicting information out there. Having somebody that can sit with you and understand your circumstances, your risks, your history, your options, and then present them to you so you can make a decision based on having a full fact find, having someone that's on your side to be able to look at your circumstances and help you. So, Ruth, in fact, I prefer the next slide to go through this more so about the roles of a financial advisor. But do you want to briefly run through this one and then we'll pull up the next one because it gives them all in a list?
Yeah, so obviously this is just a bit of an overall kind of knowledge of what is a financial advisor and what we do. There are people that are restricted, so they're restricted to give advice to certain products. And then you've got people like an independent financial advisor, which are people that are able to give whole of market advice, have lots of providers to choose from. And it's also like someone just said, Ruth, you're like my BFF. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like you're my best financial friend. If I've got any concerns, I'll just give you a call and just ask you, and then you just tell me in a way that I'm going to understand it. And I still remember that because it was such a beautiful compliment to me. So it's having someone in your corner that understands what's going on and can help explain things in a way that's easy to comprehend. And I think the next slide is one. This is what is involved in having a financial professional. I have helped on many different areas, things like this. And it's helping people with planning for their businesses that they're looking to open up or their side hustles. you know, education from teacher to helping people who felt guilty about debt, and to actually go, you know, it's okay, you just deal with it. There's so many different ones here, yeah, event planners for major events. So I've got a big birthday coming up, like 20, 30, 40, and I need to save for it. A wedding, it can be fertility treatment, it can be absolutely anything, but it's all about having someone that can help put those plans in place for you. And yeah, there are professionals out there that can help.
Yeah. And having somebody as well, I guess, when you've got changes in your career, maybe it's that suddenly you've got a different salary, perhaps it's that you've moved to a different part of the industry, or maybe it's that you've suddenly bought a house, or you've got kids, or you want to buy a house and financial situations change, or you get a renewal comes through for your insurance and it says something's changed and you don't know what any of it means. Then having someone on board that can just soundboard that and help you is worth its weight in gold, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. People that plan for year outs as well. There's all kinds of things that people have come to me, or a career break for whatever reason.
Yeah, 100%. And that is actually what our next session in the collaboration with Veterinary Woman is all about: life changes, financial planning for family moves, and career shifts, which the date is going to be announced very shortly. So you will already be on the list for that because you've registered for the series. But if you know anybody else that would be interested in that, make sure that you scan the QR code and share it with them, as well as making sure that you drop us an email to hello@vetu.co.uk if you'd like introducing to Ruth, if you'd like a free financial protection health check, or if you've got other questions, we can loop you in via email. Please do, if you'd like the financial questionnaire, make sure you're on our email list. You can drop that there as well. But we would love to know if you've got any questions, if you want to drop those in the chat, or get in touch if you've got questions after the event as well. Sometimes we percolate these things, don't we? And we realize, oh my gosh, I wish I'd asked this. Just email hello@vetu.co.uk. We can get you in touch with Ruth. We can get those things answered for you as well, or feel free to drop them in the chat box right now. But I'd love to hear from Jenny, having sat listening to what we've spoken about just here, some of your insights and light bulb moments listening along as the editor of Veterinary Woman and a readership that really wanted to know this stuff.
Well, it's fascinating what you can actually get these days. And I didn't know that you could get that range of products to cover so many different circumstances. The staged return to work. I mean, that's become so much more common in terms of the management of employment. So it figures that it should be also part of that, but being able to choose the level to suit what you need, and to tailor what you're buying to your own circumstances. I think it's so important. I mean, we know that we're all individuals and we all have very different lifestyles, expectations, needs, dependents, preferences, plans for the future. It just really makes sense to look into it in depth, and it's been great to get an overview of what sort of things are out there and what we might all need to think about for how we can protect ourselves and our families. So thank you so much.
Everything, Jenny, that I've said today is everything that you can Google online. There's nothing specific, you know, it's all out there if you wanted to have a look at it. And I know there can be an absolute wealth of information, but it's just breaking it down into, I like to say, bite-sized chunks so that you know what's right for you.
I find it very overwhelming to think I could go in and Google it, which is why I think it's very valuable to be able to actually talk to somebody on a personal basis about what you as an individual need. So Ruth, yeah, I will be in touch with you.
Oh, we've had so many hundreds of people in the community from all roles that have been so happy with the amazing time that we've had with Ruth. And the fact that there is someone that we can just go and ask those questions of that isn't going to make us feel stupid, isn't going to make us think, oh, well, I should probably have just gone and sorted this out on my own. And I know you'll add to this as well, Matt, but actually, it's been for such a long time, we've needed people that we can come to, that we can ask this stuff of. There's a big pressure often in our profession that we should sort everything ourselves and we should know it all and we should go and understand every intricacy of it. But actually, just like we'd want for our clients, we'd want them to go to a professional. Let's go to somebody that can help us see those blind spots that we might not notice. So I am going to come to Matt for some closing thoughts, but let us know, just as Ebony has asked in the chat box, what has been your key takeaway from this session, everybody? We would love to know what has been your light bulb moment. What have you learned? Get it in the chat box because it will really help us as well. So drop that in. And while you're all typing away, I will come to Matt as well, just to add some closing thoughts to this too. Although may well not have just heard me.
You know, there's also other things as well when it comes to protectionism. They might not, you've looked at kind of getting private protection, like of getting income protection taken out yourselves as an example, whereas actually if you're under a company, there's no specific underwriting done on an individual. So actually you could be covered under the protection policy if it's offered of your company, without having to disclose any medical issues, and it would be covered anyway. So it's also, you know, just another thing to think about. Matt's back. He's here.
It's back. Closing thoughts from Matt.
Hello, apologies.
Hello.
You mentioned families getting personal circumstances getting mad and not finding time to sort out your financial affairs. Well, my personal circumstances just got mad with 2 children coming home from school. Anyway, my final thoughts are thank you for everybody for giving up their time this evening to come. Definitely learn a little bit more about your own personal circumstances, your personal appetite for risk, and the challenges that you might have around your health and your need to protect your income in the future. Ruth is a fantastic resource that we've got. Please find time to spend some time chatting to her. And if you want a quick lowdown, dirty approach to how much a mortgage protection policy might cost you, have a look on the VetU website and you can have a look at the home protector policy.
Amazing. Thank you, Matt. And we've got some wonderful light bulb moments coming in the chat box as well. Finding out the range has been an eye-opener, but also thinking of seeking financial advice as a friendly and easy thing to do. Love that. I need to act quick before I get any older. Like, let's take action early. I am so envious when we go and speak to those in vet school and the grad schemes. And like, I wish that someone had really articulated this to me when I was at that point, because yeah, your future self will thank you. If there is anyone at that stage listening right now, take action. And it's not too late for anyone else to take action too. So
And also,
you.
Katie,
Go
just be so proud of yourself, everyone that's on this call, for just actually taking that first step to learn a bit more. You should be so proud of yourself. This is the first step. And even if you take away 1% of anything that's said today, that is progress and a step in the right direction. And I'm proud of all of you that's on it, just for taking that next step and doing something that your future self will thank you for. So yeah, well done for just getting those knowledge bombs and learning a little bit more than you did like an hour ago.
100%. Being with us here on a Monday evening when I'm sure everybody has busy lives and lots of other things to do. So couldn't echo that anymore, and got lots of thanks for the information. Really appreciated. So a huge thank you to Jenny and the team at Veterinary Woman. We have loved collaborating. Massive thanks to Ruth as ever for being so approachable and friendly and knowledgeable and ready to help the community. And thanks to Matt and Ebony as well. So if anyone does want to get in touch with Ruth, you can see on the screen hello@vetu.co.uk. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you on the next one in the series, where we are going to be looking all about career and life changes, families, financial moves, career shifts. And yet we hopefully will see some of you at London Vet Show. We do have a fantastic mastermind session that Ebony has popped some details about in the chat box as well, that we're doing in collaboration with Vet Stay Go Diversify. So please do take a look at that too. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone, to coming on. I'll be at London Vet Show as well. Woohoo!
Thank you.